Good evening. It is now 8 minutes past 6. It's the 30th of January, 2025. Yes, it's the end of January. I'm David Zidel, and this is the ORT Jet Business Show. And tonight on the show, we've got Shraga Jameson. The way the show works is that we are going to give you a little business story, and then I'll talk to Shraga and we'll go through his business story. And in fact, we got a bonus tonight. It's not only his story, but we'll cover his dad's story, which he says is interesting. So we'll go through that as well. We'll go through the two stories on the one night. So the lesson for today is around facing hardships. I decided to go for a little bit of a jog, and I came out where I'm living, and I could turn left or I could turn right. Turning left would mean that I'd be going uphill. Turning right means I'd be going downhill. And I wasn't feeling that great, and I thought, which way should I go? The interesting thing about it is if I turned right and did the downhill, it would be easy now, but when I turned round to come back, it would be difficult. And if I went the other way, it would be hard to start with, but easier to end off with. And often we're faced with that dilemma in business, in life. Do we take the easy route, or do we take the difficult route? And often if we go for the easy things now, they become more difficult later. And if we do the difficult things now, it actually makes it easier going on. Years ago, I was a runner, and I was training for comrades. And when you train for comrades, you do these mad races in training. And I did a race called Die Dam. It's called Around the Dam. It's in Pretoria. It's a 50-kilometer race. And I started running it. And at one stage, it's kind of like 3/4 through the race, you go up a hill that just doesn't feel like it's stopping. It just goes on and on and on. And I had my head down, not looking where the top was, and I plodded up and up and up, and I was getting more and more and more tired. And eventually I thought, I can't do this anymore, I'm going to stop. And as I thought that, I looked up, and I was very close to the top of the hill. And I thought, you know what? Let me just push a little bit further. And when I pushed a bit further, I went over the crest of the hill, and then there was this huge downhill afterwards, and the run seemed a lot easier. And I started thinking to myself, wow, I wonder how many times that has happened to me in life, where it is difficult, where I struggled. And as I struggled and struggled, I thought, I can't do this. And I turned around, not realizing how close I was to breaking through. When you're running, you can physically see how close you are to breaking through, and it's going to get easier. When you're in business, sometimes when it feels really difficult, you don't know how long that difficulty is going to last. And one last related story with this. A young guy was walking down a garden path, and he saw a butterfly coming out of a cocoon. And he watched for a few minutes, and this butterfly seemed to be struggling to come out of the cocoon. So he looked a little closer, and he saw there's a thin thread that's stopping the butterfly from coming out. So with his little finger, he just broke this little thread. And the butterfly came out and landed on the ground and fluttered around a bit and didn't fly. And he looked at this and thought, something wrong with the butterfly, and he walked on. What he didn't know is that this butterfly has to struggle itself to break that little thread. And only when it breaks the thread are its wings strong enough to fly. And the battle and the thing that we find and we think is difficult is often what is building us. And the stories you'll hear from tonight and from the other business talks are people will share some of that and some of the struggle and some of the lack of knowledge of what the future is ahead. But it's being positive, it's being optimistic, it's being knowing that you can get through the struggle that gets people there. So that's my business lesson. But now let's listen to Shraga's business lesson. Shraga, when I spoke to him earlier, said that his dad's history is more interesting than his own, and that he was a refugee from Russia and arrived into South Africa at the age of 6. And you'll share with us why they left Russia. I think that was interesting. And he was a survivor, and at some stage he made boats. Then he made glass covers for bakkies, or fiberglass covers for bakkies. Shraga himself got involved from his mother's side in the Zidel sausage business, and it's a recipe that's been in the business or in the family for years, and now his son is involved. What's it, 9th or 10th generation? Ninth generation. And Shraga at one stage moved to Australia, spent 2 years in Australia, and while there they had a water issue. And looked at the water issue and thought, wow, in a so-called developed country, if they got water issues then, and I think this was in 1998, 1999, he thought, I wonder what would happen in South Africa. And he spent 2 years there and came back to South Africa and got into the water business, involved with Aquazania or created Aquazania. And even that story, where he sold the water and helped someone else with the coolers, the water coolers, is a whole lesson on its own. So I want to get to your Aquazania story, but before that, as you said, I'd like you to tell us the business lessons and the things that you learned from your dad and how he taught you things to do the way he did that. Shraga, good evening and welcome.
Thank you, Dave. My dad's story, I'll be as brief as I possibly can. My dad had a very, very privileged first 6 years of his life. My late grandmother, never knew her, but was the personal secretary to Vladimir Ilyich Lenin's wife. Her name was Krupskaya. So serious communists. He was born in Kiev in the Ukraine, but moved when he was a few months old. The family moved to Moscow. And my father grew up in the Kremlin.
Wow.
They lived just across the road behind the gum department store in Moscow, just the opposite Red Square. And my father went to nursery school and primary school in the Kremlin compound. In 1929, Krupskaya came to my grandmother and told her, "You better get out of here." At that stage, Lenin had been dead for a few years and Stalin was in charge. And Stalin told my grandmother that, Krupskaya told my grandmother that Stalin was looking for anyone who was Jewish in the Kremlin. So my grandmother left her office. She walked across the road to the nursery school and picked up my late uncle. Walked to the primary school, picked up my dad. Walked out the doors of the Kremlin. Crossed Red Square, went to the little glass business where my grandfather worked, picked him up. They walked to the train station. They caught the first train they could, which happened to be going to Leningrad, as it was called at the time. And from there, they caught a ship to Southampton. And in Southampton, they caught a ship to New York. So they thought, but none of them could speak or read English. And the ship they caught was called the Carnarvon Castle, which dumped them in Cape Town.
So they thought they were going to America.
They thought they were going to New York.
And just backtrack us slightly. So she literally walked out, didn't pick up anything and just left.
They never went back to their apartment. They never took a single item with them. My father, the way he told us the story, arrived in Cape Town with a pair of shorts and a t-shirt. He didn't have shoes.
Wow.
Anyway, they didn't have anywhere to stay. And after a couple of days, my grandfather went to the garden shul. And someone in the shul, no idea who it was, very kindly told my grandfather that you will not find a job in Cape Town. It's in the middle of the Depression. The only place you got a chance of finding a job is Johannesburg. And he bought my grandfather, my grandmother, and the two boys train tickets to Johannesburg. And the way the story was told to us is that you'll know you get to Johannesburg when you cross the second big river and you come to the city. So my grandfather stayed awake and he watched the first river, the Orange, go past. He watched the second river, the Vaal, go past. They came to a place where there were lights, so they got off the train. It was Krugersdorp, not Johannesburg. So they found themselves in Krugersdorp and again didn't have anywhere to stay.
So this was now, instead of Joburg, South Africa, Krugersdorp, USA, or South Africa.
They probably figured out they weren't in the US by then. They ended up being befriended by two families, the Gottsmans and the Fittingoffs, who owned a mine concession store, and they were given permission to sleep in the concession store between 6 at night and 6 in the morning. And for the first 6 months, that's what they did until eventually my grandfather found himself a job.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there because we have to take an ad break. And this is not when I want to stop, but we'll come back. So they had to leave early in the morning. So they were there just for the night.
Yep.
And we'll pick it up from there when we get back. Welcome back. This is the ORT Jet Business Show. I'm David Zidel, and I'm speaking to Shraga Jameson. And he's busy telling us about your father's story. And well, your grandfather and then your father's story when he was a youngster, and they arrived in Krugersdorp thinking it was Johannesburg. And then
anyway, so they went to the only school in the neighborhood. It was an all Afrikaans boys' school. My father was one of only 2 non-Afrikaans boys who was horribly treated. He was the subject of horrible anti-Semitism. Eventually, my grandmother sent him and his younger brother to a boarding school in Meyerton. She divorced my grandfather and married someone who agreed to marry her on condition she didn't bring her boys. So these 2 little boys were shipped off to Meyerton with no real home to go to. In fact, they were left there during the school holidays with no food, nowhere to go. Just the 2 of them in the boarding school. When my dad was 11 and a half, the headmaster called them in and told them to pack their bags. They were being sent away because no one was paying the fees. And my father begged the headmaster to keep his brother in school, and he would go and find a job and pay for his brother to go to be kept in school.
At the age of 11?
11 and a half.
Wow.
So he hitched a ride to Johannesburg. He found accommodation in a boarding house, and he got a job working in a business called Cycle Hire Company for a Mr. Simons, putting spokes in bicycle wheels. In the boarding house, he formed the most remarkable lifelong friendships with 4 older men who were all university students. And they took care of him, and they loved him and cared for him. A short while later, he got himself an apprenticeship to become a welder so that he could earn a little more money, because he never earned money putting spokes in a bicycle wheel. And then shortly thereafterwards, war broke out, the Second World War, and I think he lied about his age, or he may have been old enough, I don't really remember. And he got himself conscripted in the army, became a member of the Signals Corps, those that fixed radios, and he learned to fix old valve radios. After the war, he volunteered to be a radio operator on Dakotas, flying supplies to the Israeli army during the War of Independence. When he finished that, he came back and he opened a little shop called Home Radio, fixing radios in the middle of town, corner Kirk and Rissik Street. Anyone who's a fan of Seagull sausages and has a bit of a memory understands that that address was the address of the butcher shop that belonged to my grandmother and my uncle. My grandfather had passed away. So that's how he met my mom. And he was fixing radios, but he wanted to go sailing. So he built a yacht in the basement. He taught himself how, and he built a little yacht in the basement.
So with no knowledge, he just...
Whatever my father ever wanted to do, he found the knowledge, he put in the effort, and he succeeded. Nothing ever stood in his way. The funny part of that story is when it came to taking it out the basement, it didn't fit out the door, so they had to break the door out. But anyway, one of those 4 original friends was a man called Rex Evans. He had a car, so they loaded the little sailing boat on the roof of the car, and they took it to Emmarentia Dam. They had a great day sailing. At the end of the day, Rex said, I want it, and he bought the yacht. So my dad went back and built number 2.
So he built it just for fun, and
he built it just for fun.
Then sold it.
Sold it to his friend.
If you've just joined us, this is the ORT Jet Business Show, and I'm talking to Shraga Jameson about initially his father's business and his life, and then we'll get to Shraga's business life itself.
Anyway, he built number 2. They took that one to Emmarentia Dam. Second friend, a Greek man, Dennis Leon Sinis, bought that one. So he went back and built number 3. By the time he'd finished building number 3, he wasn't in the radio business anymore. He was in the boat building business. And he built a successful boat building business. At one point, he was building 24 boats a day.
Wow.
1973 was a turning point and an important lesson for me. October 1973, most of us will remember was the Yom Kippur War. We came home to find my younger sister and I came home. I was just bar mitzvah age. My mom and my older sister were sitting in the kitchen very worried. The government had gazetted the banning of the recreational use of fuel, which meant that effectively my father's business had been closed. My dad came home every single night for supper. It was cast in stone. He never missed eating dinner as a family. He came home much later with a big smile on his face to tell us, "Oh, I should have come to tell you. I forgot. I'm sorry. Don't worry. Everything's going to be fine." He turned around and ran out. I don't think we slept much that night, but the next morning we went to the office instead of going to school. And we found out what had happened. He had bonded his house. He had bonded the property we had on the Vaal. He had bonded his business property. Called all the staff together. He employed about 200 people at the time, and he told everyone, "Don't worry. Not a single person is going to go without a salary. Not a single person is going to lose their job. I'll make sure everyone gets paid." And then he called his pattern maker, a man called Andre Beekman, and together they invented something that had never existed before, a fiberglass canopy for a bakkie. And we sat around and watched for the few days it took to make the mold and to produce the first ever fiberglass canopy for a bakkie. And that canopy saved his business. It took a few weeks before they were making hundreds of canopies.
So the canopy, it's with the fiberglass similar to the boat making, but instead of making boats,
you're making canopies. The process is the same.
He found something else to do.
For the same staff to do. The same technology, the same staff.
But he came up with the concept and the idea himself and out of complete necessity.
100%.
Wow.
You know, a few years later, the pattern maker decided he wanted to retire, and my dad said to him on one condition. The condition was that he was prepared to, he gave him the share certificate for the business called Peerless Fiberglass. He gave him the canopy business. He said, "I don't need it, but you need it. And today, you'll still drive around and see Beekman canopies with a Beekman on the back with a capital A. It's run by his grandson, and my father gave it to him as a gift." It was always a message and a lesson for me that you give back where you can. So that really was my dad's story. My sister always tells me that she created in his children, he created in his children survivors. He put us in a place you will always find a way to be successful, to create a success, to find a solution to a problem. The word problem never existed. Problem was spelled OPPORTUNITY. It was an opportunity. It was not a problem. It didn't exist in Zulu. You know, so I remember when we were about to have our first child, he bought a woodworking lathe and he bought some teak and he made the most beautiful cot, which my oldest daughter's youngest child still sleeps in. You know, that was him.
Can I ask you, just thinking, well, it's an opportunity, is that something you can teach somebody, or is it just bred in you?
So there's a beautiful teaching that I live with from the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. It says, "Tracht gut wird sein gut." It's how you look at the world and how you think about things in the world. It's your attitude to everything. If you have an attitude that says, "I'm going to think good, it will be good," you can have an attitude that looks at half empty or half full. You've got to train yourself and put in the effort to have the approach that things are half full, not half empty.
So is it human nature more to look empty, but you've got to train yourself?
I think most people look half empty, but you can train yourself to look full. And I think that's hard work. It's not easy, especially when times are tough. When times are tough, you've got to work really hard to find the half full.
Yeah, and you've got that trait from your father.
I think so, but I think it's also when things are difficult, you've got to constantly make yourself remember to look half full rather than half empty. You know, life is not always easy. Life comes with its challenges, and those challenges are there. I think you were saying earlier, you know, do you turn right or do you turn left? Do you go, how long is the hill that you've got to climb? All those things are, how do you look at life, and do you make the effort to get over the hill? If you make the effort to get over the hill, well, it's a beautiful teaching, you know, that the Mizbeach, the altar in the temple had a ramp Why a ramp? Because when you're 2/3 of the way up and it's so difficult to get to the top, well, the beauty of a ramp is that you can always see the top. And when it's difficult to get to the top, you can always turn around and see how much progress you made to get to where you are. Because when it's a ramp, there's nothing that obscures your vision for the top. And that's you have to have that attitude in life. The minute you have an attitude that's defeatist, well, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So it's almost like what people normally say is have a goal, have a target, know where you're going, and that's what you're saying. Kind of and be able to visualize it.
If you can't, you've got where do you go?
Yeah.
I once had a real difficult time financially in our business in the very early days of Aquazania, and we called the staff we call them customer care, we don't call them debtors, but people had to collect the money from customers owed us money, and we said to them, listen, I have a special deal for you. The first lady that collects whatever the sum of money was, I don't remember the sum of money, but a deal to make. Here's my credit card, here's the keys, I just got a new Land Rover. And you got a 5-day, all expenses paid trip for you and your partner in 6-star game lodge in Okavango Delta.
Wow.
And they're all so excited. I said, but there's a few rules. What are the rules? You can't use the GPS that's in the car. You're not allowed to buy a map. And you're not allowed to ask anybody for directions. And they were still excited. And then one of them turned to me and said, but how do we find our way there? And that's exactly what you're describing. Unless you know clearly where the destination is, well, then you get lost. So you have to have a destination. You have to know how to get there. Otherwise, you're lost.
Yeah.
And everything in business is like that.
Yeah. So let's go back to your story.
So my story is simple. I started, I was a Parktown Boys graduate, so whatever that means. I had a great schooling. Then I thought I wanted to be an engineer, but I didn't. I certainly didn't want to be someone maintaining aircraft spare wheels, if they have those things at SA, thank God not. So I quit somewhere in the middle of, or towards the end of third year. I wanted to be in the food business. I had a passion for the food business.
And that's because of the family being in the sausage business.
So I ended up in the meat business. I had a long journey to get there. I went to work for the Beth Din for a while. I was a mashgiach. I worked for the Beth Din to learn everything there was to know about kashrus, because that was important to know from sort of the very bottom of the pile up. And I was in the meat business. My whole family lives in Oz, including my parents at that stage, so we wanted to go and live with them. When we got off the plane, my wife said, that's it, we're out of here. I don't think we'd actually got into the air bridge. We were sort of in between space. She said, this country's got no soul. So we were already on our way back by the time we sort of got to passport control. I was exactly the same business, and it was horrifying for me. The customers were the same. They were all expat South Africans. But most of them had given up keeping kashrus before they got to Sydney, sort of as they made the transition across the Indian Ocean, they gave up kashrus and anything to do with Yiddishkeit, unfortunately, which was terribly frightening for me. Anyway, so we were on our way back by the time we got there. It was just a matter of time before my wife managed to convince me. And when we were on our way back, I knew I couldn't be in the meat business again because I still had a restraint. I'd sold my business.
Is this when you came back to South Africa?
Coming back.
So how long were you in Australia for?
18 months or so.
18, okay.
And I knew what I wanted to do. One of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to be in an ozone business. Ozone is a wonderful technology for sanitizing and treating things. And one of the most prominent uses of it is treating of water, sanitizing of water. So water was where I wanted to be. But I had no way of knowing how I could possibly do that. And one of the most difficult parts was it needed much more money than I had. I had no money.
So if I can just stop you there. If you've just joined us, I'm speaking to Shraga Jameson, Aquazania. I'm David Zidel, and this is the ORT Jet Business Show. And my question to you is, why water? What prompted you to get into the water business?
So I knew what I wanted. And I've yet to meet someone who doesn't have to drink water. So I've met some vegans bad for the meat business. But I've never met anybody who doesn't drink water. So, you know, I've even met people who run. So I guess that's bad for the automotive business. But
what do you need?
But what do you need? And I liked the water, and it was part of the consequence of South Africa. It's like it's a resource that every single drop of water has been here since Hashem created the world. You know, in the days of Bereshit, there's no such thing as new water. It's all recycled water, and this was an opportunity to take something that was an essential product and possible. By the way, when I told my late father that I was going to be in the water business, he said to me, "Who's going to be crazy enough to buy water?" That was his response. It gave him, I think, a little bit of nachas when I was able to actually make a success of it.
And in those days, there was only municipal water. Where was there starter bottled?
There was some bottled water. I mean, there was sort of Valpre and Velveeta and Skoonspruit and a few other branded waters, and then there were the very fancy French type waters, Perrier and Evian, and just for fun, spell Evian backwards, and you can understand why people pay, you know, a lot of water for French Evian water. You know, spell it just now backwards, you'll see what it spells. Dave's writing it down backwards.
Well, my spelling's not great. What does it spell?
Naive.
That is brilliant.
Anyway,
but the water business was because you saw an issue in Australia, and then
what happened in Australia was that municipal water got infected with two contaminants. One was called Giardia and one was called Cryptosporidium, which made a major crisis. Tap water became unsafe to drink for a short period of time in Australia. And I knew it was only a matter of time before those kind of things became a problem in South Africa. They happen all over the world, all the time. They happen on a regular basis. Most times we don't even know about it in South Africa, but they happen all the time. And I knew that people were going to become more and more concerned about the quality of water that was going to be available from municipal supply for a number of reasons. It becomes much... I'll give you a funny question to ask yourself. What percentage of water do you think that is produced by the Rand Water Board actually gets drunk? But if you consider the fact that water goes to everything, you water your garden with it, you wash your car with it, you flush your toilet with it, everything. So, you know, if you're really good at drinking water, you maybe drink 1.5 liters of water. Very few people actually do that, although that's what you're supposed to drink, but very few people actually do that. How much water do you think is used in your toilet every time you flush your toilet? You know, 8 liters.
Wow.
So, you know, how many times do you flush your toilet a day? A couple of times.
Depends how much you drink.
But how many liters do you use if you take a shower? And if you take a bath, you're using 60 liters or 70 liters. When you really work it out, you drink a tiny percentage of the water that you actually consume. So the end result is that there's just no financial justification for producing superior quality water by the municipal authority or by the Rand Water Board, one upstream, or quite frankly, Vaal Dam. So it just made good sense to make really supreme quality water, which is what we set about to do. Anyway, so I knew that's what I wanted to do, and I was sitting at my mother-in-law one Sunday. We're there for lunch, and I was talking to a friend of hers, a man called Sunny Norman, and he said to me, "What do you want to do?" So I told him, I described to him what I want to do. He said, "What's a water cooler?" I said, "You know that brown wood grain machine you find at the end of the passage in the bank?" He said, "Yeah, I do know that thing with a glass bottle on the top." Yeah. And I told him, he said, "Nice idea." It was left like that. He was a broker for insurance brokerage called SG Frankel in Sandton at the time. And they had just been bought out by Sasfin's insurance brokerage business. That Monday, so the very next day, they had gone to that Sasfin building when it was still in the round building next to, on Scott Street, across the road from Melrose Arch. And all the insurance brokers got together and they were inspecting their premises, deciding what they wanted, and someone said, "We need a water cooler." "What's a water cooler?" They described it. One of the guys from Sasfin said, "Well, I've got a client who sells water coolers. That's his business." Sonny said, "I was talking to someone yesterday who wants to be in the water cooler business and water." And they made the shidduch. They made the match between the two of us. So we met. Sonny phoned me. "You want to meet him?" "Yes." So I met my original partner that afternoon, Monday afternoon, and by Wednesday we were in business together.
Wow. So this is a good spot to end as we're going towards an ad break, but it just shows that if you have an idea and you put it out there, then we call it luck or coincidence. The moment you put it out there, you're giving the ability of it to be created. And we're going to come back and hear how you develop just from that meeting, the whole Aquazania business. Welcome back to the ORT Jet Business Show. I'm David Zidel. I'm talking to Shraga Jameson, and we're just unpacking the start of the Aquazania business, where you told someone about a water cooler. You didn't even have the business yet, but the fact that you said it, the opportunity came about. So how did you develop from starting the business there and then to having a great business?
So I have to go back one step just before the ad break, because you said something about luck and saying it out there. I have to object. I have to go back a step. So, well, first of all, I'm not someone who believes in luck. I believe in bracha. It's a different concept altogether. So I have to say, when I told my wife that I wanted to be in the water business, she was dead set against it. And I'll tell you why. She said one of the most remarkable parts of being in the food business is that when you hear, God forbid, about someone who's having a tough time financially, it's very easy. You call the driver over and you put together a package of food, you put it in the back of the truck or the van, and you send it down the road. The driver offloads it. And you help someone out in their time of need. What are you going to do if you're in the water business? You're going to send them a bottle of water. They can open the tap. They get it out the tap. What kind of mishigas is this? What kind of nonsense? You send them water. I'm a Lubavitcher. And as Lubavitcher, you ask the Rav, you ask your write a letter to the Rebbe, and I carried it around ever since. And I got an answer, and the answer is remarkable. The answer is that if you want bracha in your life, and you want bracha in your business, you help other Yidden. And that was the real start of the success of Aquazania. There were times when Aquazania had the remarkable bracha of being able to employ as many as 26 different Jewish families in our business. And that was the reason we achieved success. Nothing else. No brilliant ideas, no great successful plans. Just create the vessel and Hashem sends the blessings. So it wasn't luck, make no mistake.
It was bracha.
It was bracha. That's what it was. And it continues. It continues every single day.
So let me take you back to, you met this person with the water coolers. You were looking to get into the water business. What did you create? They already had a business.
So his name was Herman van den Bogaert. He had a business making water coolers. And selling the vast majority, about 90% he sold. He was making a small number of them that he rented out. And I went to him and I said to him, listen, Herman, I'd like to buy a small share of your business, and I'd like to fill the bottles with water and sell the water within aqua coolers. He had an accountant, a really sweet Jewish man who was very small-minded. And the accountant said to him, listen, Herman, you've got a great business over here. Don't let this guy get involved in your business. So I said to him, well, I'll tell you what, Herman, why don't we start a separate business? We'll call it Aquazania. And we'll be 50-50 partners in Aquazania, just in the water. You keep the water coolers, we'll keep it. And the accountant thought this was a wonderful business. And my original plan was that I would buy the water coolers, or Aquazania would buy the water coolers from Aqua Coolers, and we would rent them out. And no. Aqua Coolers will do the coolers, you just do the water. So I said, okay. So that was the first choice that he made that was on the advice of his accountant, but very foolish. The second was, I said, guys, this is what I need to earn. And the accountant, he sat on swivel chairs here. Herman was sitting on a swivel chair. And the accountant, I remember him, leaned over and he grabbed the armrest of Herman's chair and he pulled him around to face him. And I saw him shaking his head to say, no ways, you're not paying him that. So I said, all right, I've got a different deal for you. The deal is I'll pay my own way for the first few months. But if I can get to a point where this business breaks even, then I want to be paid a commission of $3,000 per bottle. No basic salary. And the accountant thought that was a genius of an idea. 6 months later, I earned more than Herman for the first time. And I think he regretted the deal forever. But the end result was it didn't take long before the aqua coolers business couldn't afford to supply the coolers anymore on a rental basis because his margins weren't sufficient in order to fund the coolers, and ultimately Aquazania bought aqua coolers and the business became what it became. But the secret of it was that it was overwhelmingly difficult few months. I had to get in early in the morning. I had to fill the bottles. I had to clean the bottles. I had to fill the bottles. I had to deliver them. I had to find 4 new customers every single day. I had to bring back the empties. I had to pick up the phone and phone every customer that we had and take the orders for the next day. I had to type out the invoices and start the process all over again every single day.
So just in that little sentence, what you've said is you had a target, you knew how many you had to sell.
Yep.
You had to work like crazy in the beginning yourself. Otherwise, it wasn't going to happen. And then you create your own brokers, basically.
Well, you never create brochas. Brochas are up there. You make the vessel into which the brochas flow. That's the secret. Yes. And sometimes there are things that come down and they seem to confound you. You know, it was a few weeks into the business and I arrived early in the morning. I didn't have the gate open. I was standing there and got hijacked outside the gate. You know, 6 weeks back into South Africa and you get hijacked outside the gate. It's oh my goodness, have I made the right choice kind of thing. You got to put your head back together again and say, yeah, this is part of what you bought into and it's going to be good. And it is going to be good, you know, or you buy a machine that's going to make the bottles and you're out of bottles and it's a few weeks before Pesach and it's the busiest time for bottles because you give everyone new bottles for Pesach and the machine doesn't work. And what do you do now? And every one of those things, you have a choice. You have a choice to quit or you have a choice to muddle through and make it work. And that's the point. That's the difference between success and failure. Do you do it or do you quit? And anyone who quits, well, you've signed your own failure slip.
So this is Shraga Jameson giving us these business lessons around perseverance and around keep going and going up that hill. And we're going to come back and hear a little bit more around that story after this ad break. Welcome back. I'm David Zidel. This is the ORT Jet Business Show. We're speaking to Shraga Jameson, who's busy telling us about the Aquazania business and telling us around maybe what we would call luck, but it comes through brochas from being the vessel to be able to accept those brochas. Just take us through a little bit more of the business. How did you grow it? What was the success? What could you teach somebody who's now struggling in their business and you say, no, you must persevere?
So there are a few things. The first is knowing what you want to achieve. What's the goal? And it has to be a realistic goal. You know, I often ask people, I often ask kids, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? 5 years is a long time for a 17, 18-year-old kid. And unfortunately, very few kids actually can give you an answer to that. If you ask them a trick pupil, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? So some who want to be doctors will tell you they want to be a doctor. Most of them don't have a clue. But you ask business people, what does your business look like in a year's time? It's very rare that you have a business person who's actually got a plan for a year's time.
Serious?
Ask them.
Mm.
You know, they sort of bumble along from day to day to day to day. Is the first problem. So if you don't really have a plan, it's difficult you don't even know if you're achieving.
Mm.
You know, step one. Step two, one of the most difficult parts of making a plan is this plan actually achievable for me? So don't come up with a delusional plan. Because if you've got a delusional plan, then you're just going to set yourself up to fail. And if you set yourself up to fail, then setting the next plan becomes so much more difficult.
Mm.
Now, when we spoke, Dave, I told you the story of my late grandmother who built an empire out of a butcher shop. She used to send my grandfather to work with an envelope, a few, I don't know, 20 pounds in his top pocket. And in his desk, he had an envelope for every single expense, everything he sold for cash, everything he bought for cash. And every day he apportioned his takings into these little envelopes. When he came home in the afternoon, she would take the money out of his pocket, and whatever profit he had made for the day, she would invest. And she became a seriously wealthy lady because of the method of knowing where she was in her business every single day. And I think part of the problem with lots of people is that they don't have a goal. They don't have a means of measuring, are they achieving their goal? In fact, most people don't even know where they are on a day-to-day basis in their own business. So they employ an accountant, or they have an accountant in their business, and maybe the accountant knows, but the guy whose business it is often doesn't know where they really are in their business. So you have to own the business. You have to know where you are, what's going on in the business. Is it mine? Is it really mine? Is this me? Mm-hmm. And then make it yours. And if you don't have a passion for it, it's not your business. You have to have a serious passion. So, when you wake up in the morning, is this something you have? And then there's something else that I think is important too. I have a serious bracha in that I can switch off. I never, ever, ever took work home with me. Never. So when I went to work in the morning, I don't mind going to work at any time in the morning, as early as you like. But I came home every night. I spent every single night with my family. I never, ever, didn't matter what went on in the office, I never brought it up. Because family was family, and family was more important than anything else in my life. And I wasn't going to bring home the frustrations and the aggravations of business and let it interfere in my family life. Because if you can't separate those two, then both are going to suffer. So for me, it was absolutely crucial that I had the sanctuary of a home and a family to come to. Because if I didn't have that, I didn't have the business either. I didn't have the headspace to think of business.
Yeah. There's an amazing story I heard, and I don't know where I heard it from, of somebody who used to come back from work, and somebody watched him just before he came into the front door, and he used to do the motion of taking off a jacket and hanging it on the tree, and then he walked into the house. But he wasn't taking off anything. He just did that motion. And then they watched him come out in the morning, and he'd almost put it back on. And it's exactly what you're saying. And they said to him, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm leaving business outside. And when I come back, I put on the business suit and out I go." And it's exactly what you're saying. Yeah. Have that separation between home and business.
So the other side is, of course, that for me, there's no separation between me as a Jewish man and my business. You can't have a business that is devoid from halacha. You can't, people always laugh at me. You come into Aquazania's offices, and the first thing people notice is that all the windows are glass. They ask me, why'd you build an office where every single window is glass? Any ideas? Take a guess.
I have no idea. Well, what's the alternative to having a glass window?
A wall like this.
Oh, just a wall. Yeah.
Why are all the walls glass?
So that you're transparent.
Well, that's a simple reason, but why? Because according to halacha, a Jewish man can't be in an office with a woman with not his wife, with solid walls, right? It's a problem called yichud. So every wall in Aquazania's offices are made of glass. So there's never a problem of yichud. So when we built the building in accordance with halacha.
Wow.
So every single thing that we tried to do, everything that, I mean, you don't get it right. No one, I'm certainly not tzaddik. But if you try and do it in accordance with halacha, that again is the source of bracha. So business, your day is all in accordance with the way the Torah wants you to live.
Wow. That's a nice place to end it, but I just want to go through some of the things, like to summarize maybe what we said. So from both you and your father, first of all, always be giving back. That'll make you successful by always giving back. There is no such thing as a problem. What some people see as a problem is just an opportunity. Sell what is needed. If you can see that people need something, sell that. You saw the future by looking at what was going to happen in the water world, or the world of water. Have a target or goal and be able to measure it. Know where you are every single day, and then have a passion for it. And separate your home from work. So these are all the things that I think you've said. So I want to thank you very much for it. I'm David Zidel. This is Shraga Jameson. Thank you very much. And this has been the ORT Jet Business Show.